Hello and welcome to another amazing episode of TMC, where we are here to help you take your relationship from surviving to thriving. On
Yes.
today's episode of TMC, we have a very special guest. Miss Shivonne Davis is joining us all the way from Brooklyn, New York.
Brooklyn in the house. How you doing, Shivonne? Tell us.
I am doing great.
Awesome.
Brooklyn stands up.
Yes.
I am Shivonne Davis. Still getting used to my last name. I am a newlywed. We just celebrated 10 months this month. And a few things. I love family. Anything family oriented, I'm there. I am a relationship strategist and coach for millennial couples, just helping us get it together. The millennials giving me a hard time out here, but I love my generation. We're a little hard knock, but just really offering millennials some support to stay in a marriage arena and not just stay married, but to really stay married in a marriage that serves God with their covenant, and just getting them to understand that we are better together. The family is definitely one of the pillars of community. So that's something that I hold dear to me. And just a fun fact about me, I love tacos. I can eat a taco every single day of the week.
All right.
That's just a fun fact that I like to throw in there. And I'm just excited about this work. I'm excited about the work of just building up marriage.
Absolutely. So you mentioned that you work a lot with millennials. So let's talk about that a little bit. Why do you think millennials sometimes have some of the struggles that they have with marriage or the idea of marriage? Why do you think millennials have that?
Well, one thing I would say, some of the struggles that are very unique to the millennial generation is, millennials, don't kill me when y'all listen to this podcast, but our attitudes, it's hard. I think it has a lot to do with the generation that raised us. We do come from parents who were to be seen and not heard. So we really struggle with communication. And then we have social media is bigger than it has ever been before. We have so many different platforms, so many different people readily available if we feel like a relationship don't work. And I think that we just don't really understand hard work. I think millennials are an instant gratification generation. So if things are not going right, it's just like deuces. I could find something else somewhere else. So we don't really know about watering our grass to make it green, and we're constantly just in a space of looking and comparing ourselves to other people that we see, and those are some struggles that I see a lot when I'm coaching, or I just see a lot with friends and different communities that I'm a part of, and the struggle is real.
Absolutely. And we're excited and glad about the work that you're doing to help marriages all around the world and to help millennials, and just to, because we know that the divorce rate is extremely high. And
Yeah.
we want to do our part and helping us do your part, and we come together and make a great impact, because I agree wholeheartedly with many of the things you said. The generation that raised the millennial generation,
Yeah.
we were raised that way. Like, you do what I say, because I said,
Mhm.
don't say anything back, don't ask no questions, I'm grown, you listen to me, and that's it. And so it does create that communication barrier. And
Yeah.
sometimes as parents, we may not realize that even today someone could be doing that to their kids or to their family, and you don't realize that you're doing that
Yeah.
because you have communication issues. Then you pass
Absolutely.
that on to others, and it creates a lot of problems. So yeah, I like that you said that. So we definitely bear some responsibility, but we have the tools and the knowledge to be better now.
Yes, that's definitely the key, making sure that we get the tools and not just get them, but that we utilize them
Use them.
right.
Yeah.
When it's
Yeah.
that challenging moment, when
Uh-huh.
you feel that anger rising up, that's when we get to utilize the tools. So just really helping us be able to implement and actually walk in this thing, not to just be hearers, but to actually do. But I do think, and I will say, I do think that people like you and I who are out here doing the work, if we can touch one couple, we don't know how many generations later that we're
Yeah.
saving just from working with that one couple, because they're changing the trajectory of their legacy. And that's how we one couple at a time.
Yeah,
That's it.
absolutely.
That's
I love it. You said you're a newlywed. You just got married
yeah.
2 months
Yes.
ago. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that. That's a transition. You were single. It was about you and yourself, and you made your own decisions and you did your own thing. Now you're married. Newlyweds, have to, be careful of things they need to think about. Maybe they thought this in marriage, and once you get married, you're like, wow, okay, it's a little bit, more than I
Hmm.
thought. So let's talk about some of those things. Let's try to help our millennials and our newlyweds.
Absolutely. I mean, well, we don't even have enough podcast time, but Jesus. What I would say, I remember just like a really quick backstory. I remember being with my now husband. We were together for about 5 years before we got married. And at one point in our relationship, I'm like, well, when you gonna marry me? Like, what are we doing?
Right.
What's happening at this point? Why are we not married yet? And I think that there was just a lot of things that I didn't notice. And he never was really able or willing to give me an answer. And then at one point, he's like, we just both have to grow. For me specifically, I'm not going to speak on his story. I had to retire my petty card, that
Uh-oh.
grudge holding degree that I learned at Hard Knock University on
Yeah.
the streets of Bed-Stuy.
Yeah.
Just being real with you guys, there were a lot of things that I was not willing to die to. My attitude, I'm talking about flare-ups in a heartbeat. As soon as you said something that I didn't like, and I didn't realize that the way I was speaking to him wasn't a way that a woman should ever speak to a man.
Yeah.
Furthermore, a man that I'm questioning about, like, when are you gonna marry me? So something that I really want us to understand as newlyweds is that every day is a new moment in the journey.
Mm.
And what I mean by that is, like, don't allow yesterday's grievances to interfere with today's connection. That is something that I struggled with before we got married. Luckily for us, we did like premarital counseling, and we both, found our own therapists and coaches and started doing some of the work. But the work don't stop. I truly believe the work is harder. After you leave that altar, it's like the your vows tested immediately. I'm like, what the gates of hell just opened up? But one thing that I had to learn before I stepped into this role is that forgiveness is so freeing, and it's not even about the marriage. It's about freeing for me.
Yes.
And the transition for me was a little harder because prior to meeting him, I was a single mother. Not single in the sense that I didn't have community of my mom and like other women helping me out, but my child's father wasn't around.
Yeah.
So it was so hard. It's still hard sometimes to really allow him to come in and to be a father figure and a leader to my biological daughter. At one point, I was just questioning everything he was doing. And I had to realize that it was stemming from fear, just like the fear of unknown, of having a man around. So the transition is hard, but you can do it if you're committed to having that marriage really work out.
Shivonne, you have covered a lot in just a few seconds, girl.
Absolutely.
You have went through a lot because you're talking about being newlywed. You're talking about the work you had to learn, the things you had to learn about yourself, the
As an
work you
individual,
had to
yeah.
do. And then you talked about having a child, prior to being
Mhm.
married, and blending that with now he is father. Now he is
Yeah.
dad, and being able to allow him to be dad, and I mean, you just said a lot right there. And when you said I had to turn in my petty card, I was like, oh my goodness, because we know how petty we can be. We know how we grew up that way, and we think that that's the way it's supposed to be, when
Yeah.
really a lot of times it's a defense mechanism. It
Mhm.
keeps us, it protects us from hurt, it protects
Mm.
us from you getting the best of me. So we snap back, we got something to say, we will cut
Yeah.
you 10 ways to heaven with our tongue, and not realizing how we're damaging the relationship, because you're the man, you're the leader, you're the head of the household, but I'm talking to you like you're 2 inches tall, and then I
Right.
expect you to perform like you 10 feet tall. And
Come
we got to
on.
think about that. And a lot of times I think we don't, and we do us until we learn better. And then when you brought in the fact talking about a child, a lot of times that's difficult for people to be able to step back and let your husband, your spouse, your wife, whoever it is now, be able to help rear that child and understand that you guys are doing it together, and it's us and
Absolutely.
not just me anymore, especially if it's been that way for a while. So you've taken us through a whole lot. You said that too. It's a continual journey. We
Yes.
you talked about you and your husband doing premarital counseling and doing therapy and coaching on your own, and I think that is also amazing. That's also great because we always talk about people working on themselves as individuals as
Hmm.
well as a couple, because we can do all the work as a couple and talk about, the things we need to do better or could do better as a couple, but if you don't work on yourself on the inside, then
Yeah.
there's still going to be problems, there's still going to be things arising. And to take those steps, I think that's encouraging, because some people, I even remember seeing a post on Facebook where they were going back and forth about should there be premarital counseling. But from what you're sharing with us, that's evidence that premarital counseling, coaching, all of that works well to help you be equipped for the journey ahead.
Absolutely. I think we should even take it a step further. There should be pre-engagement counseling, if we being quite
Come on
honest.
now.
Wow, yeah.
Come on.
Really,
Yeah.
because sometimes we say yes, and I feel a lot of women, we say yes to the ring because it's something that we dream about when we're younger,
Yeah.
and sometimes we say yes not knowing the commitment that we're saying yes to.
Um,
And I tell people all the time, like, I have a good friend, she's like, a lot of, and I just said this to my husband too, a lot of people see us and they adore our marriage, but the warfare
Hmm.
is so great when you step into this covenant. And I tell people, if you are not ready to pray more than you pop off, then don't get married.
yeah,
Uh-oh.
Don't
that's
do it.
Wow.
Don't do it, because I feel like once you step into the realm of I do, it's like the enemy just use all these different insecurities against you. And if you're that type of person that's constantly popping off, i.e.,
yeah,
me, she, her, who I used to be,
yeah.
then it can't work. It can't work. It can't work because you're fighting the wrong enemy. And that's my line. If you're not ready to pray more than you're ready to pop off, don't do it yet. Don't do it yet.
Yes.
That's
You,
good. That's
you
good.
mentioned something. You say pre-engagement counseling, and I think that's awesome. So I want to ask you this question. With that being said, what is the one thing you wish you would have known before getting married?
That my husband was gonna hog the blanket. Nah, I'm joking. one thing
Yeah.
that I wish, one thing that I wish that I knew before I got married was that yes, the husband is the head, but the prayer mantle really falls on that wife.
Come
Mm,
on now.
Because pride at one time really had me asking God, why do I always have to walk on eggshells with him? And God answered me back. He was like, you're not walking on eggshells. You're handling my son with delicacy.
mm,
And I
Mm.
was like, hold up, God, what? Delicacy. I feel like I'm walking on eggshells. I always got to be the one. Why got to be me? Why got to be me? And I think that that's something that I wish I had an encounter with wives who were married, seasoned in this, who are believers of Christ and they are walking this marriage thing. I wish that I would have known that that prayer mantle really falls on the head of the wife to pray for every area of that marriage and pray without ceasing, for real. I'm now learning what that scripture means.
Mm.
Like, pray without ceasing. In the middle of the night, I'm rolling over, just looking at my husband, praying for him, praying for our children, praying for our future, praying that we handle disagreements well. And I think if I knew that, I would have been able to prepare for it a little better without the bitterness that started to fester up in me at one point, very early, like a little earlier on in our marriage.
that's
Absolutely.
good. That's good,
Yes.
and it's so true because
Yeah.
really, when you pray for his future, you're praying for your
For
own as well.
yours. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
And the
that's
future of your family,
yeah,
your
your
generation, your
legacy.
legacy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, breaking
Absolutely.
generational curse. I mean,
Absolutely.
it's huge. So yeah, we definitely applaud you for that.
Uh,
That, and I will also add that being a wife is not just about cooking and cleaning. Because I'm
Yeah,
like,
absolutely,
Absolutely.
that's my wifely duties.
absolutely.
And my first lady is like, no, that ain't it.
Yeah,
So true. So true.
yeah.
So true.
The generation we're living in right now. I mean, we're living in the generation. It's totally different than the baby boomer generation. I mean, we're
Absolutely.
living in a generation now where the husband and the wife is providing,
Yeah, they
and
both
so
work.
now
Yeah.
most of the time the husband expect the wife to do something that wives did when that's all they did back in the 60s or whatever. But we're in a generation now where
Mhm.
you have the husband and wife working, and I think it's unfair for the husband to still expect. It's like sometimes the husband get in the kitchen and cook every now and then. It
Absolutely.
shouldn't be
Yeah.
the wife responsibility; it should be responsibility of both because times have changed, lifestyles have changed, and both are working, so it's different. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, Shivonne, as you worked with millennial couples and we talked about the challenges, let's talk about one thing or a couple of things that you think maybe something that's a must have for the millennials or for any marriage to thrive. What are some things that you believe they must have to begin with?
I would say two things that I believe are the engine and the transmission of a marriage. And I use those because they're the two most important parts of a vehicle, right? A vision and communication.
Mm.
And what I mean by a vision, not the vision that we set from social media, not the vision that we think we're supposed to have, but really praying and asking God, what is the purpose of our marriage? Not just what's the
Uh-huh.
purpose of marriage,
That's
but
good.
what is our purpose to carry out together in this covenant?
Yeah.
And being able to hear from God and live that thing out. Yes, we're going to live it out with mistakes. We're not going to dot every I and cross every T. But I think that when couples have a vision, it steers every part of the relationship from sex to finances. Everything in between is in that vision. Things like frivolous spending or things that we might watch and listen to that's just not conducive to the growth of our marriage. And I feel like without a vision, you really don't know where you're going.
Mm.
And a lot of couples are living life right now aimlessly, just don't know where to steer the marriage, what direction you're headed in. And it's chaotic. And then I would say communication. This one is really big. I do think that we live in a culture that glorifies
Mm.
self-care, self-love, self. Self-preservation is one of the big ones that I hear a lot of therapists saying, even in marriage, like self-preservation. If he or she don't give in, then you don't do this until this and that.
Oh
And
wow.
I think it's BS. And what I mean by BS is a false belief system. It doesn't work in marriage. When we're full of self, we're full of pride, and a lot of us can't communicate because of that. So one thing that I stress is learn the power of shutting up. Everything does not have to be said. But
Wow.
as I
Yeah.
said, with us living in this culture that glorifies self, you have a lot of people saying, no, say whatever is on your mind and get it off your chest. You don't want it to this, you don't want it to that. But we have to learn how to use wisdom
Yeah.
when we speak, be able to communicate openly, even when you upset, when it's tight, when your body is hot and your heart is pumping hard.
Yeah.
Learn to lean into that feeling with empathy, and more so I would tell people lean into sadness instead of anger, because then you're able to have a softer approach. So I
Mm.
think that those are two of the main ingredients. People might have them, but they might not know like the recipe to really step into that thing fully. Um, to keep their marriage going. I tell people it's going on 24 months since my husband and I had an argument. And I get a lot of coaches that challenge me. Every healthy relationship argue.
Yeah.
Every healthy relationship have disagreements. We don't have to argue.
Yeah.
I already know the end story. We win.
Yeah.
We create win-win solutions. So what are we arguing about versus bringing your ideas and my ideas to the table and saying, hey, what's best for us? What's best for the marriage?
That's
So I think that those are two of the main things.
that's awesome. You said that, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
The two, the vision and the communication, and you talked about the aspect of somebody not having the vision. And if you look around you, I mean, you have social media, but one of the biggest things is if you don't have your own vision, you get caught up in the television.
Yeah.
If you
Come on.
if you don't have your own communication, you get all caught up in telecommunication. So
Yeah. Oh, I like that.
you have to create it yourself before you get
Yeah.
influenced by things that have
Yes.
nothing to do with you. It don't know you. It don't know who you are. I mean, only you guys can create
Yeah.
that
That's
tailor-made
it.
Yes.
relationship, and it's not on the Family Matters and all these shows, the Cosby shows, and some of the new shows, which I
Oh, I don't
really
know no
don't
new
know.
shows. I can't help you.
I really don't know. Yeah,
And
so
tell them, make it plain. And it's not what you saw in your mama and your daddy house either.
Either.
yeah.
It-
Come on
it's
now that's
Oh,
something we have
that
to
whole point.
definitely dig into.
yeah.
That's something we definitely have to dig into because I feel that for parents it's a nugget as well as for us, going into a marriage. My mama did this, my daddy
Yeah.
did this,
Come on.
but just because your mom and your dad did it, first of all, you didn't marry your mama or your daddy. You married somebody else.
Yeah.
You didn't marry your daddy. You married him. You didn't marry your mama. You married her. So they're
Yeah.
different people and they grew up in a different household. They grew up with different. So you have to come together and have discussions and figure out what's going to work best for your family and where you all are trying to go. Just like you said, the vision, because the vision that you all have for your marriage may be completely different than what your parents had. That, we talk about, Cedric was talking about the baby boomers and all that, and their vision was like, work for someone till you
Mhm.
retire, get you a gold watch and sit at home, get your pension check. But now we're in an age where we're talking about entrepreneurship and business ownership, and we're talking about legacy and generational wealth.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that's something completely different than what our parents were talking about. So that means that the vision for our marriages have to be different than what they had, and it has to. It takes more of a work to do something different, and I think
yeah.
that's a thing that we definitely have to remember.
Yeah.
What we saw in our parents' home or what we saw in our family or displayed before us is not always necessarily the thing that's going to work for us in our relationships.
Absolutely, absolutely. And even if you grew up in a household where your parents had a great relationship, it doesn't mean that the way that they structured their relationship is going to be the thing that worked for you. Take
Absolutely.
what works and leave what doesn't, and just start to create. That is the one thing I would say I love about millennials. I feel like we open up the door to be different. We
Yeah.
open up the door to therapy. We opened up the door to seeking help, to seeking our higher self, a better version. Like we the ones that put all that on the map, trying to do things
Absolutely.
differently.
Yeah.
So I would give millennials credit for that. We could be a little rebellious sometimes, but a rebel is not always a bad thing. So that I just wanted to add that piece. I don't want the millennials to come after me after this podcast.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I agree with you. That is true. They are the generation that asks the why. Like why?
Yeah,
Why do I have to do this? Why is this something that we do? Why is it this way? And but the generation before, like Cedric said, was more or less that we just went along with it. Whatever it was, you just go along with it.
Yeah.
So I have a fun question for you. If your marriage was a television series, what would the name of that series be?
Ooh, so many different names come to mind. I'm gonna say the one that came up first. I think if we had a television series, it would definitely be Babe, did you see mine? And the reason I say that is because something is always missing in this household. Babe, did you see my keys? It's usually me. I'm not even gonna lie. Did you see my purse? Or my husband will open up the fridge, babe, do we have this and that? And I'm like, it's literally right there. But I would definitely have to say that that's what it would be for us. And even in the way that we gracefully check each other when somebody is just, and they stink funk,
Mhm.
it's either like, babe, well, babe, did you see my wife? Like my queen? Or
Oh
babe, did you
wow,
see
I
my
like
king? Where,
that.
where he at? And
Yeah.
it was funny because in our wedding vows, we wrote our wedding vows completely separate. And we both ended up saying a line of, on our worst days, I promise to speak to the queen or king in you and not the fool.
Oh
And
wow.
that's really
Oh
that's
wow.
really what it's like.
That's good.
That
Man,
So
is
when we see the
awesome.
fool acting up, babe, did you see my wife? Did you see my husband?
that's
Oh
amazing.
wow.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
like
yeah.
So yeah, it would definitely have to be that for us.
I
that's
love it.
good. That's
I love
good. When you were talking, Shivonne, you were talking about vision and communication, and you said we don't have to argue. And then you said you used the word disagreements, and I think that it's important that we talk about that a little bit too, so
it.
that the people the listeners can understand that there is a difference, and you can
Right,
have a disagreement, but you don't have to have an argument. You know what I'm saying? We
right.
A disagreement means one thing, and arguing means something else. And I think that's awesome. And I'm so glad that you shared that because that encourages other couples that we can have the same thing. We could have months where we're not arguing, we yelling and
Absolutely.
screaming at each other, or we're slamming doors or any of that. We can disagree, but we can do that respectfully. I'm glad that you said that. And then you backdoor with the have you seen my queen? Have you seen my king?
Yes.
That's
That's awesome.
good. That's good.
That's awesome.
Where they at? I need them to pull up right now because this fool ain't working for me.
Right.
But yeah, I think that's definitely important to highlight that arguments stem from pride and
Mhm.
disagreements stem from just a difference in our opinion. And
Absolutely.
arguments, I feel like arguments, somebody's seeking to be right and making the other person wrong.
Mhm.
Um, But the way that we try to handle things for the most part is to bring it to the table. So what is it that you're saying? And what is it that you're trying to get me to understand? One thing that my husband and I realize is that what we're saying is not always understood by the other person.
Right.
Mm,
So asking questions, this is not easy.
yeah.
It's not easy. And I just want to preface it by saying it's not easy, especially for me, because I was raised in a home where we were voiceless and that caused me to feel powerless. And it's something that I struggled with for a very long time in my adult life.
Mhm.
So coming from a place where I didn't have a voice, when we first met, it was like, rah, 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 rah. You're going to hear me because I felt like I was never heard before. But I
Mm,
think at some point with a lot of therapy, with a lot of coaching, with a lot of understanding, I had to realize that the enemy that I would see when we were in those heated arguments were the people that I felt like snatched my voice away.
Wow.
But when you're arguing, it's mainly you fighting that old trigger of whatever it is that's coming up for you in a moment.
yeah.
But when you're disagreeing, you understand that partnership is present.
Mm.
That's what makes it different. When you step into an argument willing to lay down your right to be right, even if you are right. And I'm right a lot. I'm just gonna say that. Don't call him I said that. He in the back room coughing. He said, "Mm." Laying down your right to be right and just say, babe, it's you and I. It's the two of us. What do you need from me right now?
Mhm.
And understanding if that person doesn't know what they need, they might be flustered with emotion. I'm learning this still. Like, just give them a moment to get it on track. And once you release that pride of I need to be right or I need to be heard right now, you need to understand what I'm saying. You're not gonna be in an argument.
Yeah.
You can't argue with somebody that you're in partnership with.
Yeah, absolutely. You said
So
something.
that's what it is.
Yeah, you said something really interesting. You used the word. You said understand and understood. Explain that. Explain that to the listeners.
I would say go into the conversation seeking to understand.
Mm,
What you have to say in a moment is not more important than what your spouse is saying. And I think when both parties show up that way, it opens up the door for a back and forth dialogue.
yeah,
So if I'm just coming in there eager to say no no no, I need to say this because this is what you did and da 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 da, then it creates a space where that partner now feel like they have to defend themselves
yeah,
versus hey babe, what's going on? Talk to me. And what else? And just asking those questions. What else? Is there anything else? Oh my God, I didn't even realize that I caused you to feel that way. And owning it.
yeah,
Because just because you ain't mean to make them feel like that doesn't mean that they didn't. And when you seek to understand, it brings down the guard of your spouse. Who gonna want to fight with? Ain't nothing left after that to do but to put the kids to sleep and make love.
yeah.
I'm just saying.
Yes,
They
yes.
say makeup sex is the best sex. No, partner sex is the best sex. And when you
Right.
can speak in partnership, it
Um,
makes a difference for it. It creates a different level of trust,
yeah,
a different level of safety. And it opens up the door to create more joy after you guys are done coming together with a solution that's marriage driven, a we solution versus a me solution.
right.
Mhm.
That's awesome. You said another thing that I want you to speak to. You talked about also about win-win. Explain that.
Win-win situations is like I just said to you, we create a solution that's based on us. Compromise has to be present for win-win agreements to take place.
Right.
So it's like maybe, or my spouse want to go out on Friday night and I want to go out on Friday night as well. How do we create that? That
Yeah.
can look like, hey babe, what time is your event? Okay, and what time is yours? Do you mind? I know that you're supposed to be home with the kids. Do you mind if my mom watched them tonight so that we can both go? Or even bigger situations, financial things. Well, hey, I do realize this is something that you really wanted to purchase, but we do have a goal of, I would say, hours of buying a home. So is it possible that you can buy this the next time we get paid instead of now so that we can put this into, the savings account for buying our home?
Yeah.
And I think when you put that into the perspective of the bigger picture being us,
Yeah.
nobody feels like they're losing.
Yeah.
But if it's like, oh well, I had my plans first to go out on Friday night, and now coming up with plans because your boys want to go out, I don't know what you're gonna do. It's like, well, when do I get to just enjoy me as well?
Yeah.
So finding a solution that would get both of you guys what you want, even if what somebody wants mean it has to be delayed for a little while, and being okay with that.
That's good. That's good. I love it. Love it.
I
Love
like
it.
that. I like that. I like that. So you're talking to a single person. They're single. They're not or they may be dating and they desire to be married, what piece of advice would you give to someone who's single or dating and desires to be married?
Hmm.
That's a good one. That's a pretty loaded one. I want to say so much to them. They might run once I'm done, but I think the greater thing that I can think about in this moment is that you got to release that selfish need, that those selfish desires. And the reason why I say that is I didn't like to think of myself as selfish when I met my spouse, but I really was very me oriented. I
Uh-huh.
didn't really know what it looked like to share a space with a person, and not just physically, but emotionally, because some of us can be emotional hoarders, and then we play like the victim card and things like that when we're operated in selfishness. So I would say don't step into the arena of marriage until you really understand that every part of you has to be let go in order for you to step into that new role. And I
Mhm.
think when people hear that, we get scared. Oh, marriage shouldn't change you. Relationship shouldn't change you. If that marriage is not changing you, something is absolutely wrong.
Uh-oh.
Because that spouse should be calling forth your better self every opportunity that they
Come
get. So
That's
on.
good.
Come on.
if you're not willing to just, I'm gonna just say it. If you ain't willing to die every day, because it's a continual death.
Yeah.
If you're not ready to let go some of those things and just really take on a posture of compromise, a posture of understanding, a posture of selflessness, then you ain't ready. You're not ready. And I'm not saying that it all goes away at once. Marriage will continue to prune you once you take your place as a husband and a wife. But I think that a greater majority of it have to be released before you even step into getting engaged. Be okay with not always being first and putting the needs of the marriage before yours.
Wow.
I would
That's
say,
awesome.
and that's what I really wish somebody would have taught me.
Wow. And that's awesome. And I love that you said that because I hear all the time people get married for selfish reasons.
Mhm.
People
Yes.
get married because of how it may benefit them, and then a few years down the line, I believe that's why the divorce rate is so high.
Mhm.
And I
Yeah.
believe that's
Yeah.
why people that listen to this podcast is going to be equipped that divorce rate is going to be dismantled and it's going to be bind because of the words
Yeah.
that's spoken here. Because I believe a lot of times people get married for other reasons except the right reasons. And I'm listening to what you're saying. I mean, about marriage, really totally about it's selflessness and not being selfish, So it's
Yeah.
yeah, I love
It's
Right.
it.
how do I get to serve? I literally wake up and ask God, all right, God, I'm empty. How do you need me to serve today?
Yeah.
And I mean serving in every capacity of the word. And the last thing that I just want to leave the listeners with, to that same question that you asked me, don't get married for happiness.
Mhm.
It is happiness is an obsession at this point.
Yeah.
In marriage you create moments of joy. There's no such thing as getting married because I'm happy with him or I'm happy with her. That is false. That I never even heard the word happy in biblically. Now that I'm sitting here thinking about it, but you really get married to serve the kingdom every single day, even when it hurt,
Yeah.
even when they getting on your last nerve that you ain't even know exists. You
Yeah.
got you got married to serve the kingdom.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
We don't always like it. Ouch.
Awesome. So, so Shivonne, so if someone wants to connect with you and what you're doing, where should they go?
You guys can find me at I am Shivonne Davis on Instagram. On Facebook, you can find me in the Kingdom Millennial Marriage Movement. It's a Facebook group that I have for millennials who are married or engaged. And at ShivonneDavis.com.
On behalf of the TMC family, I would like to thank you so much
Yes.
for taking
Yes.
time out of your busy schedule and adding value to us.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for having me. I really look forward to creating an ongoing relationship with you. I love what you guys are doing in the community, and just keep on doing the great work.
Thank
Thank
you.
Y'all are forced to reckon with.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
We'll be in touch. Thank you again.
All right. I'll see you guys later.
Thank you for joining us again today on TMC. We hope you enjoyed this video. And if you did, go ahead and subscribe. Click the like button and turn on your notifications so you'll be notified when we upload a video every week. And if you're listening on iTunes, rate the podcast and leave a review. And we want to invite you to head on over to our leadership podcast, Lead to Greatness, where my husband is interviewing entrepreneurs and great leaders every week.
So we want to thank you for joining us today on TMC. Looking forward to hanging out with you again on next week as we continue to help you take your relationship from surviving to thriving.
Bye. See you next week.